Hello, I'm Yilda Sethi at Crazy Normal for better health and well-being. I'm a psychotherapist, author and founder of Rapid Core Healing, Emotional Mind Integration, PTIT Trauma Recovery, and a family constellations practitioner in promoting better ways of working with the mind. I'm inspired to dispel myths and lay out facts about your mind and relationships and mental health. And I'd like you to join me in an exploration of what it is to be a crazy normal like me. But do it in your own way so you can be free to be you. Hello, welcome to another Crazy Normal. And today I have somebody called Ligia, who's situated in USA, who has a lot to share with you about grief, and not just about death, but other aspects of grief as well. So I'm going to hand you over to Ligia right now. Would you like to introduce yourself to the group, Ligia?
Thank you, Yildiz. It's an honor to be in your podcast, in your show, because I like the name that you have, Crazy Normal, because Crazy Normal, we talk about normal so much in our society. And when we talk about grief, especially, people many times send the message, that the way you are grieving is not normal. And I have come to realize that that is such a pressure. That is such a pressure, and that's why when I talk about grief, I want to be so open about it. I want to welcome people to be the way they are, because we are so unique, Yildiz. And I believe that's a beauty, no? That we are unique.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
Wouldn't it be boring if we were all the same? Yes.
I know. So we're unique. Our grief is unique. And that is my main message when I talk about grief, that to validate it, to validate who we are, because based on how we are, we grieve. And this is such a sacred word for me, because yes, grief, is a natural and unique response to loss. And mainly, we link grief when we lose a loved one to death. However, we know that we can experience so many losses, so many types of losses in our lives since we're children. And when we experience a loss, definitely we grieve.
So thank you so much, Ligia, for that introduction. Before we go more deeply into your work, could you tell me a little bit of how you got to this point, how it came to be a major focus for you, this particular area of therapy or support? It's kind of both, isn't it?
Yes.
And tell me how you got to be to this at this point. What drew you here?
Something very close, and thank you for asking. Something very close to my heart. You mentioned that I live in Florida, live in Miami, Florida, and originally I'm from Nicaragua, Central America. So when I was 12 years old, living in my country, I lost my father. I lost my father suddenly. It was a heart attack, and an heart attack. And the thing is that was so painful, and eventually that's what took me, to study what I studied: psychology, thanatology, which is the study of death and dying, thanatology, and specializing in grief and loss and healing in all that, because I came to realize so many things about grief, because I, of course, I had my period of very sad and crying and all that, and then life continues. We continue with life, and I was very cheerful, very happy, very cheerful, and all that. Then continue growing, and when I went to study psychology at the University of Miami, I did another major in religious studies, because there was a course that was named Death and Dying. Yielded. It was a magnet to me. I'm like, I need to take this course. I have to. When I I entered and I started, studying that, I realized what made me wanting so strongly to take that course because I have not really processed the grief of my father. I have not. And even though I continued, happy and all that, but when I started talking about that, when I started talking about grief, all that was so strong. And, I would cry and I would talk to my professor who became my mentor, eventually. I love him. And because my other area is aging, I'm a gerontologist. And he was also involved in aging and dying, so very close. And I realized the importance of validating our grief. And that's what made me get into this world, inspired me to get into this world of the bereaved, helping people going through the grieving process. And I started with the death of a loved one. However, the more, I started working with my clients, I realized that, yes, there are so many losses, so many other losses. That's why, I opened kind of an opening the umbrella, to welcome the other types of losses. So that's how I started in this profession.
That's amazing. Yeah, amazing. And also when you look at different cultures, because you come from a different place as well originally, and I do too as well. But when you look at the indigenous cultures of the world, they grieve very much more openly and very much more as a group with you, don't they, when you grieve? They have whole big ceremonies and wailing and all sorts of things. Different groups do different things, obviously, but it's a collective grieving as well for the person that's grieving the most, as well, which I think is open-ended, and they even kind of keep revisiting at the end of 6 months, at the end of a year, or annually after that. So it kind of really is a very different way to the way we're doing things in the West.
It is amazing, no? It is so interesting because now that you are saying that, I'll share this with you and the group that about 2 weeks ago, I came back from Wisconsin because there was the conference, the International Death, Grief, and Bereavement Conference. We do it, every year. And I presented about Hispanics and grief. The way, just what you said so beautifully, how we bring our culture to our grief. Like in our case, Hispanics, we are the family unit is extremely close. We call that familismo, no? Very close family. And our religion also, plays a huge role. Again, not saying that all Hispanics are like that because we don't want to generalize, right? But something that is proper of our culture. For example, in Mexico, because Mexico, Hispanics, they have a ritual that we don't have the rest of Latinos, and that is the Day of the Dead. Are you familiar with that?
No.
Oh, you're going to love this because it is so amazing. It's November 2nd, and it is the Day of the Dead. They dedicate this whole day to honor their ancestors, and they even bake death bread. They even make like sweets, with skeletons, the shape of skeletons. I mean, it's the whole thing. They go, are you familiar with the mariachis, musicians? Okay.
No.
Mariachis, it's proper from Mexico. It's a band, group of people, men generally, and they play guitar. And it's very, very, it's typical from Mexico. So they go to the cemetery and they play that. They go to the funeral homes when they have a wake or something, they play that. So, and it's like people gather, they create amazing altars. So it's so typical of Mexico. So talking about collectivity, being everything is collective, people come together. So it's amazing how our culture plays a huge role on how we grieve the death of a loved one. Yes.
Okay, and that's kind of interesting because that includes the whole culture. That means babies, children, teenagers, everybody. Here in the West, there's a sense of, oh, we can't talk too much about death because it's too scary for the children, and so I think, in a sense, our children are probably more shocked when it happens because they're not been introduced to the idea. I mean, we all know we're going to die, obviously, but there's no conversation about it. There's no inclusion of this in life, that we live, therefore we die, or whatever. There's no introduction. I know for myself, I was in my, how old would I have been, 40s, before a first member of my family died, in my 40s. Can you believe that? Right? So, I
Yes.
mean, I had been protected from death for such a long time, you know?
Exactly.
And is that healthy? I don't think it is. I think if you live in a third world country where people die of illnesses and famine and diseases and war, where you're introduced to it so much earlier, you have to cope with it earlier somehow. Whereas we
It
live
is
in a bit of a
interesting.
false environment here, with our extreme medication and our extreme everything. And, we seem to think it's not fair that we even die in our 40s or 50s or 60s. It's like, well, hang on.
Exactly.
We all have a
Exactly.
lifespan. Yeah.
No, and you know what? Absolutely. And you know what? I taught at the university death and dying. I ended up teaching that course that was so close to my heart. And it was interesting because, I would always ask my students, what made you take this class? Because it's so, unique. And they would say that they wanted to know because in their families, they wouldn't talk about it. They wouldn't know, for example, what hospice is.
Yes.
Unless, do you have hospice in Australia?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. So, but like most of my students didn't know what it was unless, they had a grandfather,
Yeah.
a grandparent, or
Yeah.
maybe a parent
Yeah.
that needed the hospice care, no? But
Yes.
if not, they wouldn't talk about these
That's right.
things.
That's right.
So the way that I conducted the class, that I taught the class, was yes, it was about death, absolutely. However, emphasis in living. Because if we come to realize that we're going to die, like to really embrace our mortality, we're going to die, and our loved ones are going to die. I believe, Yildiz, that we wouldn't waste too much time,
Exactly.
fighting or being upset or resentful. Or I think that we would appreciate more the
Yeah.
time we have.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I agree with that so much because, I think for many years now, probably you too, Lihia, I've lived mainly knowing that I don't know how long I'm here. So if I want to do something, I do it now. I reach out to people now, or I tell people what I need to say now, because how long do we have, really? We don't, none of us really know. We can guess, we can hope, but we don't actually know. That's out of our control. Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. And even the idea of being out of control for Western people is a scary thing because we feel that we can control everything. It's actually not true. I mean, we can control as much as we can of ourselves, but we can't control our environment, and we can't control our bigger story of how long we live and when we die, right? Or when our loved ones die.
Yeah.
So it's
Do you
almost
know,
that coming into
do
a
you know that?
humbleness about that, because
Yes.
that we are small in the face of universal energy, aren't we? Yeah.
I love that. Yes, absolutely. You know that when you mentioned that, you reminded me something that really showed to us how little control we have.
Yeah.
And it's when we experienced the pandemic, when we
Yes.
experienced COVID
Yes.
19.
Yes.
And, here in the United States, I can say, because I live here, it's when you realize you don't have control over not only, life, safety, security, your the world the world we knew, or assumptive world, totally out of control. And it was interesting because I am subscribed to a magazine called Psychology Today.
Okay.
Maybe like 4 months after COVID. Oh wow! When I received it, because remember the beginning was lockdown, we couldn't go out and all that, so I didn't come to the center, not to my office that I have here. However, it was maybe 5 months after that I received the magazine, and to my surprise, I was like, "Oh my God, look at this! Now we are naming this on the cover, the huge word, grief."
Yes.
The huge word. So it came from the back burner, no? It came to the front burner, grief, because we were grieving so many types of losses.
That's right.
And I'm like, wow, it took this to realize that we don't have control.
That's right. That's right. That's right. And a lot of the time, our education system and the modern systems try to tell us we're all in control. It's actually, yes, we control as much as we can, but there are bigger forces at play as well, and we need to, accept that we're part of a lot of cogs all turning at different points.
Yes, no, it is true. And that sense of when people are lacking control, they feel, they feel vulnerable. But the thing is that we are all vulnerable.
That's right.
And that's
right.
beautiful.
That's
We are
right.
humans.
And I also know from COVID, were a lot of teenagers, young people who seem to have developed anxiety disorders or, social connection disorders or all sorts of things. And, it just seems to me that the way we're bringing up our children and the way I was brought up as well, probably in the West, is not building resilience to life and the ups and downs of life and what can happen, right? It just seems that in a way we are protecting our children so much that even a small shock or a big shock is too much for them to take, which is such a shame, isn't it?
It is so true. Wow, you reminded me of something else. You're bringing so much insight. Thank you. And because in my first book I wrote about grief, it's called Transform Your Loss, Your Guide to Strength and Hope. And in that book, I introduced a methodology I created, the 11 Principles of Transformation.
Right.
And I do, seminars and workshops and all that. And long time ago, I did it at a church here, and Universal Church, and it was a program for several weeks. And the first day, this woman came, this mother. No, she didn't come. She called me. She called me up, and she's like, "I am planning to take, your seminar and all that, and I want to know if it's suited, if I can bring my two teenage daughters," she said, "if it's proper for them." And I asked her, what made you want it? Are they going through a loss? And she's like, it's just that I want for them, see how interesting, so proactive, right? I want them to be prepared because she had lost her father, the mother, when she was 18, and she was lost.
Yeah.
She didn't know what to do. She didn't understand grief. I mean, for her it was horrible. And she said, I want my daughters to be prepared, to at least have idea what to do when they suffer a loss. And I was, I admired that woman so much. And she actually, she came with her daughters and they stayed the 8 weeks, they stayed the whole program. And it was very insightful for the daughters, and for me, to get insights from them. It was adorable because they shared,
Yes.
because it's, the principles is not only to accept the loss and live your grief and all that. Also, it builds some resilience.
Yes.
Making decisions, because it's our decision how we're going to manage our grief.
That's right. That's right. And also nice for the mother to know that when she dies, her daughters have got some understanding or coping skills or resilience, right? The word resilience, I think, is a really important one here, because if you've never had any shocks or big disappointments in your life, how do you cope with something as big as a death, right?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes. And it is not taught, in school, Yildiz.
no.
It is not,
And it's not even
and
taught in churches, I don't think, is it really?
no,
Yes,
because
as far as I know, yeah.
these are life skills. We can learn
Yes.
math and science and, wonderful, beautiful history,
Yeah,
wonderful.
yeah, yeah.
However, life skills to deal with what happened, I believe that because my first profession, when I started the helping profession, I was an addiction counselor
Okay.
many years ago, many years ago. And I remember, about the program. And there was a section at the hospital, because it was our hospital here, South Miami Hospital, that there was a program just for teenagers. And that program was packed with it. There was a man in charge of that. He was excellent with them. And we would talk about that. Adolescents, they go through bullying, they go through, disappointments, all those things, pressure, peer pressure, and all that. And if they would have life skills taught to them and how to navigate that, many of them, and this is my belief, wouldn't need to use drugs to cope with all this
Well,
life.
I see drugs personally as a coping mechanism, right? It's usually they're feeling awful and they manage to grab something that helps flatten it or numb it or whatever. And so that's it, they're hooked now, right? Whenever they get a little bit of that stress, they need more and they need more and they need more until they're hooked. And then, yeah, it's difficult, isn't it? So,
Yeah.
I guess that kind of touches a little bit on how I work as well. I work with the cause of trauma, right?
Oh,
The cause of trauma. So, and I do it very quickly within a session, going back to the actual original situation in their amygdala, right? And helping them. I have a whole process of processing that trauma in the amygdala, so that they, if it's a loved one, that they see the loved one and they're able to talk to them and they're able to complete, unfinished business and get that connection back again, even though they're dead, right? And that makes such a difference, right? And that's just talking about a trauma of death, but there are many other traumas too, such as abuse and bullying and
yes.
other things. Yeah. So yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Yeah.
It is another world. It's another world, and the thing is that it is such a shared world.
Yes.
But because we don't talk about it, I say this a lot, and that we walk around with a mask. You know, we walk around with a mask. I presented last week, actually, my book, my latest book. I presented at a public library here, and I was talking about that to people. So because we're walking around with this mask, not a COVID mask, a mask, like that, and because in society we're expected to be great all the time,
Yes. Yes.
wonderful,
Yes.
sometimes we're not
Australia too.
okay,
You ask somebody, how are you? Oh, I'm great. Right?
of course, and
Really?
if they tell
It's
us,
interesting. You go to England, you say, how are you? They say, oh, I've got a bad back, or I'm feeling a bit tired today. You say, oh, that's different, right?
I love that, because but we have that mask. And I
Yeah.
was saying to my people, and I said, well, but you know what, the hardest thing is that we may get used so much to wear a mask that when we look ourselves, at ourselves in the mirror, maybe we are still having that mask on and we do not connect with our emotions.
That's right.
We do not connect with who we are really behind the eyes, like behind this, who you are, because we are so used to a mask. And I believe that is causes,
I think
of stress.
yeah, I agree. We're used to wearing a mask and we don't have the knowledge and skills and examples in our life to show us how to live authentically, right? A lot. So if everybody's doing this same game, we end up doing it too until we reach a crisis and like a death or a loss, and then we're faced with our emotions. And yes, we can swallow them down, or we can seek help and process them, can't we? Yeah, yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's because sometimes people just don't know.
No,
They don't
that's
have
right.
that awareness, like they just don't know. And but when we get into that space and we allow ourselves to just release all that, such a difference.
Yes.
Such a difference, because there are so many losses that we go on a regular basis, and we are talking about resilience. We are more resilient than we think.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. I think with this idea of being normal, whatever normal is, which has become narrower and narrower and narrower, if you're anything just a little bit differently, you are encouraged to think you're a bit strange, or you better shape up and just become like everybody else. When it's not true, as long as you're not really off the radar or
Exactly.
damage to yourself or anybody else. No, be who
Yes,
you are.
exactly. Because the thing is that sometimes it's like a cookie cutter, you know,
Yeah,
like this, and like this, and like this. And people, not everybody, but many people, based on your experience, most likely based on mine, many times they follow a path that is the normal path, quote unquote, and they are not happy
that's right.
because they want to pretend, or they want to just do it because to please another person, but inside they are not happy. And that breaks my heart, because this life is a gift, and it
And it's
depends how
so
we live.
precious. It's so precious.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
precious. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I agree with you totally. So, what do you do in Florida, Ligia? You are obviously a therapist. You're seeing people in this grief part, and grief also extends to other areas other than death as well, from your perspective. Yeah.
Yes, yes. I have a center in South Miami where I see, one-on-one, see families as well. And I love the idea to accompany people when they are grieving. I accompany them, to go through the process. And I love also to coach them to find a way, to tap into the resources that we all have, and tap into that to find a way, because it's like a parallel, to process grief, because I believe in validating grief. That my latest book is called Allow Me to Live My Grief and Heal from the Inside Out. So allow me, give me permission, right? Sometimes we have to give ourselves permission.
Absolutely.
And so it's like parallel, processing, validating grief, processing, and at the same time, life continues. So it's to take those steps, to move forward, not moving on with a loved one, move on. With a divorce, you move on. But with a loved one, they live in hearts.
That's right.
So I love to do that. I have, a space at the center where I do seminars, I do workshops, meditation classes. So all of that wanted to help. Basically, I do the program of the 11 principles of transformation. I call it transforming grief and loss. And I also do other types of workshops, like letting go of stress and anxiety, I like also one that I love is about fear, letting go of fear. I love that one because fear, this sometimes it paralyzes us. So, so many limitations we impose on ourselves because we are scared. So this type of things I do here. I travel, doing
Do you
seminars.
ever do work with people online?
Oh, of course,
Yeah,
yes.
because
I actually
that's
have
important
my
for me to ask because I'm in Australia and there might be somebody listening to you who would like to possibly, connect with you online and see if that's possible in that respect.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, because you know that even before COVID, I would do it because I know people in different parts of the world, no? And but with COVID, of course, it got like more usual. But I do it, via Zoom. Some people, when they have FaceTime, even if they're in Europe or in Australia, if you have FaceTime, we can connect that way, via an iPhone. I have my program of the 11 principles in English and Spanish. I have it
Okay,
as an
great.
online program as well. I'm very active, in the social
As well.
media, Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook,
Okay.
TikTok, and so I like to give messages. I have a YouTube channel as well, and I have a podcast, but it is only audio, and it is only me giving messages.
Okay.
And they're short. Well, the podcast is bilingual. It's called Transformando el Duelo in Spanish and English, Transforming Grief.
Okay.
And they are short messages between 6 to 15 minutes, short, and they go to the point. So the topics are always there, listed. So if the person feels like, I want to hear about this, so they can go, they choose, and they listen to the message. So that has been my intention, and I'm so happy because we reached 100 episodes already. We have I have 112, I think, 13. So happy with that. And now I want to, move forward the step of doing video because I would love to do this as you do, to have conversations. And once I have that, I will be more than honored to have you as a guest. That would
That
be
would be
beautiful.
great. Yeah, that would be great.
Yeah. So I want to do this because it's
Okay.
beautiful to connect. People like to see conversations. So yeah.
And I do it mainly because the world is in such a mess, right? It's just so terrible. So rather than focusing on all the tragedies that actually I and you can't do anything about, let's create a community, right? Community of hope and
Yes.
connection
Yes.
and resources and possibilities, right? Rather than looking at the awful things that are being done in the world right now. That was my intention, really, and particularly with mental illness, how things have narrowed and narrowed, and almost everybody's getting a diagnosis now and medication for things that, if it's worked well with, you don't have to have. It's just something you need to process, right? That's
Yes.
my experience of my work, and probably your experience too, Leah.
Yeah.
So yeah, that it's a way of making a new community is what I'm trying to say, right?
Absolutely.
Or
And
giving a
I
new
love that you
message of
said that,
hope. It's not
to
all
bring
doom and
hope.
gloom.
Yeah, because just as Gandhi said, right?
Yes,
Be the change you wish to see in the world. It
absolutely.
all it all starts with us.
That's right. That's right.
It all starts
And
with
and
us.
our poor
So
children, or the children, right? It's like, if all they see is doom and gloom and nobody or no other groups are there that give hope and possibilities, no wonder they're depressed. No wonder they're anxious.
of course,
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
course, yeah. No, I love the intention you have to bring in this. And for how long have you had it, Judith?
Only since
You
the beginning of this year.
pero
Brand new,
amazing,
brand new. So
brand
I've been
new, pero look
learning.
at
I've
you.
been learning as I go.
That's,
so
well,
so
isn't
so
it?
so
It's a
this is
learning
so,
process.
and I've
Yes.
made mistakes, right? So it's like good. That's just part of learning. That's we
But
don't
you know what?
we don't
That's
have to be
great that we
perfect.
can make mistakes.
Yeah, exactly. We don't have to be perfect.
Yes.
Okay, well, look, it's been absolutely a pleasure to have you on the show, Ligia, and I will get all of your details to put in the notices underneath the podcast, so people can not only listen to this conversation but also contact you if they want to contact you about anything at all, or even get access to your books. They're on Amazon, are they, or are they somewhere else?
They are, yes,
Yeah.
they are available on Amazon.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Ligia Houben, is that right? Yes.
Yes,
And I'll
that's right.
spell that out in the notes so people have got it correctly as well. Thank you so much for coming on board.
Thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure to have this conversation with you and an honor to be in your podcast. So I send a hug to all beautiful people who are watching us, and we always hope, right, that they take this message and bring some hope into their lives.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. You can find out more about me and what I offer at rapidcorehealing.com or contact me at yildiz@yildizsethi.com.